All right, let's get back to the serious matters at hand now. And Ollie, we'll have to start on a topic that we have talked about for the last couple of weeks now. That City have been in this slump, and that is unfortunately Pep Guardiola's future because obviously he's out of contract at the end of this season. But in the last few weeks, where City have been dropping points left and right, he's done what Pep has done over the last few years when anything goes against City, and he's been very defiant and said things like, "Now is the time. I want to be here more than ever," and get things back on track. And we've had reports this week that the club and Pep are in negotiations over a potential extension. Now we don't know if that means 1 year, 3 years, a lifetime extension. We don't really know yet. You and I have talked on this podcast before in the last few weeks about how maybe a 1 year extension is actually not the best thing for the club because we've got an aging squad that needs a bit of work. We've got a sporting director who's on his way out, who has been the key to building this squad in the last 10 years or so. And I think I can speak for you here when I say it seems like the thing to do going forward is either a big reset, 2 to 3 year extension for Pep and give him another cycle of players, or you've got to get fresh blood in because there is a chance of things going stale.
Yeah, the ideal situation is that Pep does renew for 2 or more years. The second best situation is that Pep goes. And it is mad to say that, but I stand by it. I've said it said it the last few weeks. I think it's become even more apparent now. 1 year won't do. And 1 year won't do because of where the squad is at. I mean, I look down at the list now. Ederson made noises in the summer about leaving. Kyle Walker's getting on. John Stones, how old is he now? 30 years old.
Yeah.
Suffering from a lot of injuries. Who else we got? De Bruyne, also in the last maybe year or two at City.
Kyle Walker.
Gundogan. Yeah, mentioned Walker.
Okay.
Did I mention Walker?
I don't know. I was sending a work
listening?
email, so.
You weren't listening. I did mention.
Your boss is listening.
De Bruyne, Gundogan, again, Rodri. There's been there's been a few whispers about Rodri as well, and he was talking about not closing any doors.
Yeah.
So there's Rodri as well. We've got an Erling Haaland extension that we need to nail down. Jack Grealish. I'm not going to speak right now.
Is there a case that we should hope Rodri never gets fit again so that he physically can't leave the CFA?
I'm going to continue because there are so many issues that I don't want to get sidetracked. Bernardo Silva, been making noises for years about leaving. That is a lot of players. That is a lot of players. And if Pep is only extending for 1 year, what does that mean? Well, for outgoings, we're just going to stretch these tired old legs a little bit longer. For incomings, there's going to be some players that we want to be bringing in long term that won't commit unless they have an idea of what the future of Manchester City Football Club looks like from a managerial and coaching perspective. We are in a less than ideal spot for now. And if Pep only extends for 1 year, none of those things are resolved. None of them. Now, I don't want Pep to go, but it may serve us better in the long term if he does go, assuming he's not going to sign for 2 years or more. He has to put his signature on 2 years or more, even if that does mean that he's going to leave at the end of the season, or at least the end of next season. But at least then you can go to players in the transfer market, wave this piece of paper in their face, and say you've got at least another year with Pep Guardiola, potentially two.
Ollie, let me ask you this. What if, and obviously this is a hypothetical, but what if Hugo Viana comes in the summer, and we'll get on to that because there's been a bit of news in that side of things. But what if Hugo Viana comes in the summer and says, Pep, I'm happy for you to stay for a year. You've got all the credit in the bank at this club. However, the direction of the squad is in my hands. It's not going to be about stretching 1 more year out of this core of players. He may say, I'm going to build this squad with the next 5, 6, 7 years in mind, but I'm happy for you to coach it. What about that?
But that isn't how we've traditionally done things. The way that we've always signed players has been...
But we're not in a traditional time, are we? Because there's a new sporting director. Pep is on the fence about his future.
But then we're potentially exposing ourselves to the kind of problems they've had over at United, where they've had one manager spending 300, 400, 500 million pounds under the inverted commas for the listeners, club's vision or club's culture, that then the next manager has come in and it's completely unworkable for them. That could happen to us. The way we need to do it, we've got a recipe for success that we've established now over the last 10 years or so, whereby the manager, in conjunction with the director of football, in conjunction with Khaldoon and the scouts, all come to a consensus on the summer transfer targets, on how to build the squad, what they want out of the squad, what kind of player profile they need, etc. That can't happen if Pep's sticking around and Viana's taking control, because we may not have a new manager lined up yet. And we really don't want to end up in the situation where there's a disconnect between the football that the manager wants to play and the squad that they've got at their disposal. So, just to reiterate, because people are going to be listening to this thinking, no way does this fucker want Pep to go. No. I want Pep to extend, but he has to put his name to at least 2 years, even if he only does 1 year. So his contract extension has to go to the end of 2027, at least, even if he's going to leave in summer 2026. I would rather, after that he leaves, as opposed to just signing 1 year. That's where I'm at the moment with this.
I'm going to play... So I actually agree with quite a lot of what Ollie said, but for the purposes of balance, I'm going to play some serious devil's advocate here, because I think there's a world where so at the beginning of the season and sort of at the start of this, as things have sort of gone on, even as things have got a little bit worse, I've always been of the opinion that I'll take an extra 6 weeks of Pep Guardiola if I have to, because it's Pep Guardiola, and like, you don't get this manager like ever again. Like he is a one-off, like once in a generation / lifetime phenomenon for your club. You don't get like United. United had Matt Busby, and very few of them got to see Sir Alex Ferguson as well. And now I'm pretty sure United fans are not going to see another Sir Alex Ferguson who were there for that. We're probably not going to see another Pep Guardiola in our lifetime. So I'll take it for as long as I can. On the transfer strategy point of view, to begin, I think I kind of understand the idea of not spending all that money just for a new manager to come in and sort of be like, well, this is not necessarily my vision. However, the club has had since Pellegrini arrived, and this is probably just all in service of Guardiola ultimately one day arriving, a pretty consistent type of player, type of system that they want to play. That if the club were to do that without necessarily having Guardiola's input on who the players coming in were, we will not be looking for managers who do not fit the style of play of the type of players that we would be after. We'd be buying players very much with a manager who plays a certain way in mind. And would you rather that the club was the one spending 400, 500 million, or have a new manager come in and spend 400, 500 million who then doesn't work out and it turns out they have to go in a year or two's time? And we are in the Manchester United situation where United are dealing with $500 million worth of Ten Hag signings that are either shit or probably just not wanted by Amorim when they come in. On the sort of uncertainty side of things, with Pep only having a year left on his deal, I think Rodri said in the interview that he's done today that when he arrived, he was very much under the impression that Pep was only going to be here for 1 more year, and he still signed. And we had players join before Pep was even in the thinking. Like, I know that it's a different time in football now, but we signed David Silva, Yaya Toure, Sergio Aguero when quite frankly, we were shit compared to now. Like, we weren't, obviously we were still like, up there by the time these players were coming in, but we weren't what we are now. There are a lot of reasons to come to Manchester City that are not Pep. Obviously, if you lose Pep, you lose a huge pull. Like, that is obvious. That is undeniable. Like, Pep is a large reason, probably more prominently with the likes of Rodri and Haaland, a huge reason for players to join Manchester City, but he is not the only reason. Players talk on international duty. Players talk like amongst themselves because a lot of footballers are friends just generally, like even random across random leagues and stuff like that. The football community will know how good life is at Manchester City for players. Whether you're looked after well, the amount of care that players get is second to none. Like all the player liaisons and stuff like that. There are a lot of reasons to join Manchester City that are not just Pep Guardiola. And honestly, a little bit of me is like, if Pep's only going to stay for 1 year, would we all rather that these players who are going to take into the next manager, the next cycle of Manchester City, would you rather they were coached by Pep Guardiola for a year or not coached by Pep Guardiola for a year before that, because I'll always take coached by Pep Guardiola for a year personally, because like I think giving anybody that kind of experience with the greatest manager of all time is always like no player would say no to that. Very few fans would say no to that, I imagine. And having said all that, I actually agree with a lot of what Ollie said. So yeah, there you go. I don't even really. I'm so, my head is so like in the middle on this. I'm kind of at a point now where if I found out Guardiola was leaving at the end of the season, I think I've been won round to the idea of that not being the worst thing in the world based on how the squad looks and how this season is beginning to look. But also, if I find out at the end of the, you know, in this next couple of weeks that he's only signing a 1-year extension, he'll be leaving in 2026. I think I'll still be happy with that. So yeah, I'm very much right down the middle on this. I don't really know what I'll think until it happens one way or
I'm
another.
the same way. I think I'd have the exact same level of joy and the exact same level of trepidation if Pep leaves at the end of this season and there is a new sporting director and a new manager coming in. It will be not joy in the sense that Pep is leaving, but it's something fresh to be curious about. Exactly. And by the same flip of the coin, I would say that if Pep extends for a year and there's a new sporting director coming in, it's still equally as exciting to see a potentially fresh voice in those discussions over transfers and the direction of the club. And maybe Pep comes in for one more year and Hugo Viana signs some players for the future, and Pep says, no, actually, I think I want to work with these players for 2 to 3 more years. And, we always have the conversation on here about, other than to the golf course, where can Pep go? He's not going anywhere else in football at the moment. So as long as Pep wants to be coaching and still wants to be involved on the daily basis of changing the direction and the future of a club, there's nowhere better for him than City. But on the Pep poll thing, it's an interesting thing you say about how post-Pep, City should still have that pull with the players that want to play in the Champions League and so on and so forth. I actually think where that Pep pull comes in the most is more like with recruiting players like your Julian Alvarez's and your Claudio Echeverris and players like that who maybe have 3, 4, 5 big European teams courting them. I think the players that are bona fide internationals that are going to be wanting to be competing for trophies now, I think City they're going to be one of those clubs for the foreseeable future, no matter who's at the helm. I mean, look at United. They have their period of sustained success, and even if they wallow in 9th and crash out of every competition they're in early in the competition, you still have players coming in saying, no, I'm here because of the badge and the things that can be achieved at that club. United fans won't want to hear it. Liverpool fans won't want to hear it. Arsenal fans won't want to hear it. But City are one of those clubs now. They just are. And I think whether it's Pep or Ruben Amorim or whoever it is at the helm in the next 10 years, that pull will still be there for players that want to compete and win trophies. So, yeah, long story short, I think I don't care what happens, Ollie, in the next 8 months, because I think that what the club have shown over the last 10 years is that I think they've got a bit more safety nets in terms of long-term capitulation when it comes to making huge changes at the top and in the team.
Yeah, I agree with what a lot of Joe's said. I agree with what a lot of what you've said. And I think that's the privilege of having a club that is as well run as us, that whatever does happen, we trust that we will find a way to make it a positive thing and make it work. I don't think at this stage there is an objectively bad outcome between the three. There's just a long list of pros and cons.
Yeah, I agree.
I think, weirdly though, I think I'm with your line of thinking that the worst outcome is Pep extends for a year and takes this same squad into the next season with one or two changes and thinks, no, it was the injuries, it was players betting in, let's give it another go. I think that's probably the worst thing that could happen, because if you drop, again, like we've seen the past few weeks, if you drop 2 or 3 games on the bounce, immediately it's aging squad, loss of mentality. Those conversations won't be there if you go into a 2-year extension and you refresh with 3 or 4 ins and outs in the summer.
Yeah. I think either way, we're going to have a refresh this summer. I'm just a little bit concerned about our ability to undergo and execute a successful refresh if there is only a year left for Pep. That's my concern. All that being said, if we get relegated due to 115, I am supremely confident Pep will stay, because the only thing he hasn't conquered yet are the lower leagues of England. So that'll be exciting.
That
The only manager to win all 4 divisions.
would be
Pep's football
It
manager
could happen.
Speed run. Yeah.
Oh
that
yeah.
would be just so fun to watch.
Oh, it'd be phenomenal.
So
It would be
fun
incredible.
to watch.
Absolutely incredible. I genuinely would not have any reservations about turning out week in, week out and enjoying myself if we got relegated 1, 2,
Oh,
3
and
divisions.
we've
Don't
been
care. It'd be
we've been
fantastic.
very public on this podcast about the consequences of City becoming the club that they are these days, and how many of those consequences might be alleviated with a swift kick to the lower leagues.
Yeah, it'd be phenomenal. What's there not to enjoy? We've done it all, right? We've done it all. If that had happened and we hadn't won the Champions League yet, or we hadn't won the Premier League, then yeah, it would have been a kick in the throat. But we've done it all. We've been through it all. We've experienced it all. We've had the highest of highs. Now, unironically, it would be... People do it in Football Manager and FIFA. That's what they do. It's a video game save, right? You take the biggest club in the world and you drop them down the pyramid and you bring them back and restore them. It'd be unbelievable. And you know what? I actually think City will get bigger for it, just purely for the amount of international interest in watching what happens. So, yeah, shit, bring it on. That'd be amazing. But I would love it to be under Pep if it was to happen, just to see him managing it.
That was the first part of the show. If you want more, make sure to check the City Ramble wherever you get your podcasts from.